Today's lesson is on the characteristics of parabolas. First of all, let's notice that the x and y intercepts are where the parabola touch the x-axis, and the y-intercept is where it touches the y-axis. The vertex is always going to be either the lowest point or the highest point. If it's the highest point, like this, we call this a maximum. If it's the lowest point, we call it a minimum. Also, the axis of symmetry slices the parabola exactly in half, and very obvious but important is that the axis of symmetry always passes through the vertex. We have a special equation for the axis of symmetry, and it's x equals negative b over 2a. Very important that we say x equals, because we know all x equations are vertical lines. So it's always going to be vertical. For example 1, I'd like for you to identify the vertex, axis of symmetry, x and y intercepts, minimum or maximum value. And then actually write the equation in vertex form. Let's start with the vertex. We can see that it's right here, and that appears to be over 2 up 1. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write that 2, 1, and you must have parentheses around it. The axis of symmetry always passes through the vertex, and it's crossing the x-axis at 2. So we say x equals 2, and you have to have that x on there. And notice that it's just the x value of the vertex. Now the x-intercepts, let's see. We're able to see them easily from this graph, but if not, I'll show you another way to find x-intercepts later when we have an equation. So it appears that we're going through 1, 0 and 3, 0. And always write that as an ordered pair. And notice that the y values are 0. Now when we do the y-intercept, it appears that the y value is negative 3 and x is 0. Now, let's circle whether it's a minimum or a maximum. It is the highest point on the parabola, so we say it's a maximum. And now the value, very important, value means y value. Okay, that's the y value. So we go to the vertex and ask ourselves what's the y value, and that would be 1, and we can see that right there. So the value is just 1. It's not a line, it's not an equation, so we just give the numerical value only. Now, let's write the equation in vertex form. Well, let's recall that vertex form is y equals a minus h. Y equals a times the quantity x minus h squared plus k. This minus sign reminds us to go opposite. So we're going to go opposite of positive 2, and that's going to be x minus 2. Don't forget the square. And the y value keeps the sign. So if it's positive, leave it positive. Now, the only thing left is to figure out what A is, and is A positive or negative? Well, I can look here and see that 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So we didn't double or triple the values or cut them in half. So A is 1, okay, and it's turned down, so I know that it's negative. So this is going to be a negative sign right here. Example 2. Find the vertex. So when we're in standard form, there's a couple easy steps that we can do to find the vertex, and I'll show you what you can do. So let's just say step 1. And this works if we're in standard form. Okay, so if it's in standard form, this is the method you'll use. Okay, step 1, we're going to use x equals negative b over 2a to find our x value, because we know that the vertex is always on the axis of symmetry, and that's what this is. And then step 2, we'll plug x in to find y. Okay, so those are just a couple of easy steps that we can follow. Now let's see how that's going to work out. So remember, standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So I can clearly see that this is in standard form, where a is 1, b is 8, and c is 13. So now, when I want to figure out x equals negative b over 2a, I'm going to put my negative sign. I'm going to go grab my b is 8, and then a is 1. So that's simply negative 4. Now that I know my x value, and that's when I'm looking for the vertex, we're halfway there already. My x value is negative 4. Now I just got to find the y, so I can take the equation and plug x in for all the x's. So that would be negative 4 squared plus 8 times negative 4 plus 13. Negative 4 squared is 16. Notice how I brought the value in parentheses. And now I'm just following my order of operations. And I see that y equals negative 3. And that's my vertex. So final answer. Okay, so to recap that, if you notice it's in standard form, find the axis of symmetry first. That tells you your x coordinate. And then plug in for y, and voila, you'll find your y. Example 3. Let's write this parabola in vertex form and then graph. So the first thing I think I want to do is find the vertex, and that'll be very easy to write in vertex form. So I'm going to repeat the steps that we did in example 2. X equals negative b over 2a. That's negative 8 over 2 times 2. So negative 8 over 4 is negative 2. And now I'm going to plug in my x values. being very careful of my order of operations. Those algebra skills are being used constantly. So I'm going to do exponents first. So that's a positive 4. And 8 minus 16 plus 7, that's a negative 8. Plus 7 is negative 1. So I see my vertex is negative 2, negative 1. Now we have to be very careful. We're going to write this in vertex form. So that would be, remember vertex form is y equals ax squared. Nope. X minus h squared plus k versus standard form is what you were given. And I'm just going to write it again because you can't see it too much. And notice that they both have an A. You got an A here, and that's the same value. Same value. Okay? And that's going to be super important. And don't forget the A. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this vertex and plug in H and K. In this formula, the vertex is HK. So I get y equals AX minus, or you can just go with an opposite sign. So minus a minus 2 is plus 2 squared, and leave this sign the same. Okay? When you put the negative 2 in, it becomes positive 2. Now, what about the A? That's actually the easiest part. All you do is see what the A was in the original and borrow it, and that's your A. Okay, so vertex form. Once you know the vertex, super easy. So that's vertex form, standard form to vertex form. Now we're going to graph this parabola. We already know what the vertex is. And so remember in the last lesson, once we know the vertex, we go to negative 2. Oh, that's kind of messy. We go to negative 2, negative 1, and we decide if it's turned up or down. It's positive, and I always say positive people make me smile. Negative people make me frown. So that's how I remember which way to turn it. So I have to look. This is a 2. So that means I'm going to double the squares. Pay extra close attention to this. Double the squares. 1 squared is 1, but I'm going to double that to 2. 2 squared is 4, but I'm going to double that to 8. Okay, and that's actually enough points for a really good parabola. Nice and round. Okay, and notice because that coefficient is a 2, it makes this parabola skinnier than regular parabolas.